When you're dealing with an avoidant, the most shocking truth isn't that they don't feel love. The shocking truth is that love is not the first thing that opens them. Safety is. Their nervous system needs to feel safe with intimacy before their heart can fully attach. And if you don't understand that order, you'll end up doing everything that feels loving to you and accidentally triggering everything that feels threatening to them. Because you might think love is built through intensity, through constant closeness, through deep talks every night, through always being available, through proving your loyalty again and again. That's how an anxious heart often experiences bonding. More connection equals more security. But an avoidant system often reads that same intensity as a loss of control, as a future demand they may not be able to sustain, as emotional exposure that will eventually reveal their fear of not being enough. So you show up with warmth, reassurance, effort, vulnerability, and they might even respond beautifully at first. They might be affectionate. They might be consistent for a short burst. They might act like they've finally found something real. Then suddenly, the internal alarm goes off. It's not always because you did something wrong. It's because closeness starts to feel like a cliff edge to them. This is why so many people get trapped in confusion. You think, but we were so good. We were connecting. We were building. And then they retreat, and you start blaming your worth, your energy, your emotions, your timing. But when you see the nervous system truth, everything becomes clearer. They weren't rejecting your value. They were reacting to the pressure their body associates with love. For many avoidants, closeness has a history. Closeness might mean being criticized, being controlled, being responsible for someone else's emotional stability, being swallowed by expectations, being needed in a way that feels like suffocation. So when love starts to deepen, it doesn't just trigger joy, it triggers memory. Their body begins preparing for a role they fear they can't perform perfectly, and their safest escape becomes distance. That's why the first stage of real avoidant attachment is not romance. It's regulation. It's their system learning that intimacy doesn't always come with emotional chaos, that love doesn't always equal pressure, that closeness doesn't require them to lose autonomy. And when they experience this kind of calm, consistent, respectful connection, their internal resistance starts shrinking. This is also why chasing usually backfires. When you chase, you're doing what feels like care to you, but what feels like threat to them. The more you push for immediate reassurance, the more their system feels trapped. The more you try to secure the bond through urgency, the more their body whispers, escape. And that's how a beautiful connection starts turning into a push-pull loop, where you become louder to feel safe, and they become quieter to feel safe. The key here is not to become cold, it's to become steady. Avoidants don't fall in love because you are the most intense. They start falling when your presence is predictable in a healthy way. When you don't punish them for needing space, but you also don't abandon yourself to accommodate their distance. When you express needs clearly without emotional explosions. When you can hold both warmth and boundaries at the same time. That combination is rare, and that's what makes their system soften. Because safety for an avoidant is not just emotional comfort. It's the absence of emotional entrapment. They need to feel that getting closer to you won't mean losing themselves. That your love is not a contract that silently demands perfection. That your needs are real, but expressed in a way that doesn't collapse the relationship into crisis. When they experience that kind of mature intimacy, their fear of closeness becomes less powerful than their desire to stay. This is why self-respect is so attractive to the avoidant nervous system when it's healthy. When you don't chase, when you don't beg, when you don't flood the relationship with anxiety, you're showing them that this bond is not built on survival. It's built on choice. You're proving that you won't make them the sole manager of your emotional life, and that reduces their pressure and increases their trust. So the shocking truth is not some trick, it's a sequence. Safety first, love second. Regulation first, attachment later. Not because they are incapable of love, but because their system needs evidence that love can be calm. And this is where your power becomes simple. You stop trying to force the timeline. You stop trying to earn love with over-giving. You stop turning your worth into a performance. Instead, you become emotionally stable without becoming emotionally unavailable. You become clear without becoming clingy. You become warm without becoming self-erasing. And when an avoidant experiences a love that doesn't feel like a trap, their body slowly stops bracing for impact. That's when the door opens, not because you chased harder, because you became the kind of connection their nervous system could finally breathe inside. The reason your chasing backfires with an avoidant is not because your love is wrong. It's because your urgency collides with their nervous system in a way that turns connection into pressure. You're trying to build safety through more closeness, more clarity, more reassurance, more togetherness. That's a logical and loving instinct for an anxious or secure heart. But an avoidant system often interprets that same energy as a countdown to expectations, a countdown to emotional responsibility, a countdown to a version of intimacy they don't feel ready to sustain. So what you experience as love, they may experience as a threat to autonomy. This is where people get trapped in the most painful misunderstanding. You think if I show how much I care, they'll feel secure. They think, if I get too close, I might be trapped in something I can't handle. So the more you lean in when you feel distance, the more they lean out to regain control of their internal state. You're not both reacting to the same emotional language. You're speaking different dialects of safety. Chasing also accidentally teaches the relationship the wrong hierarchy. It places you in the role of emotional manager and places them in the role of emotional gatekeeper. You become the one who constantly tries to repair the bond, clarify the bond, stabilize the bond. They become the one who decides whether that bond gets warmth today or distance today. This isn't about blame. It's about the system you create together. When your pursuit becomes predictable, their withdrawal becomes low risk. They learn, even if unconsciously, that you will keep bridging the gap. So they don't have to build the same level of internal courage to stay close through discomfort. That's why you can do everything right and still feel stuck. You can communicate respectfully. You can offer reassurance. You can give space. You can be patient. But if your energy still communicates, I need an answer now to feel okay, the avoidant nervous system often hears, I am responsible for your emotional stability. And for an avoidant, that's heavy. That's exactly where they start deactivating. They don't just pull away from you. They pull away from the pressure they associate with intimacy itself. Another reason chasing backfires is that it shifts the focus away from their behavior and onto your emotional reaction. The moment you become intensely focused on getting clarity, they can start labeling your need for clarity as the problem. You're overthinking. You're making this too serious. Why can't we just take it easy? Those lines can sound casual, but they often function as a shield. Because if they can reframe your needs as excessive, they don't have to confront their inconsistency as damaging. Your pursuit becomes the distraction that protects them from self-reflection. And then you start doing the thing that drains you the most. You start editing yourself. You try to be more chill, more detached, more easy. You swallow your needs to avoid triggering distance. You become a quieter version of yourself just to keep access to the connection. That is the tragic twist. You're chasing the relationship, but you're also slowly chasing yourself out of your own identity. The most dangerous part is how chasing creates addictive relief cycles. When they withdraw and you pursue, your anxiety grows. When they finally return with warmth, your body experiences a rush of relief. Your brain learns to associate their sporadic affection with emotional safety, even though the pattern is unstable. So you don't just crave love. You start craving relief from the anxiety their distance created. That's how people get stuck for months, sometimes years, in a loop where the intensity feels meaningful, when it's actually the nervous system searching for regulation. This is why the real shift isn't about playing hard to get. It's about restructuring the order of intimacy. For avoidance, safety must come before deep attachment. You cannot force attachment to create safety. When you chase, you reverse the order. You try to secure the bond through urgency. But their system needs evidence that closeness won't become emotional captivity. They need to experience that you can love them without losing yourself, and that you can ask for respect without turning the connection into a crisis. This is where steadiness becomes your power, not coldness, not silence as manipulation. Steadiness. You stop chasing reassurance that they're not ready to offer consistently. You state needs calmly. You allow time and behavior to be the proof. You don't punish them for needing a healthy amount of space, but you also don't reward disappearing acts with instant full access when they return. You begin to communicate a new truth with your energy. I want closeness, but I will not abandon myself to earn it. A healthy avoidant who is ready to grow will feel relieved by this. They will feel less pressure and more respect. They will lean into the clarity because it now feels safe enough to approach. But an avoidant who depends on control will feel threatened because your steadiness removes their ability to manage the relationship through distance alone. So the heart of this keynote is simple. You're chasing backfires because you are trying to create security the way your nervous system understands it, while their nervous system is still learning that love can be calm. When you stop making your love an emergency and start making it a standard, you give the connection its best chance to become real. And even more importantly, You give yourself the peace of knowing you no longer have to perform for consistency. If you want to understand the real doorway into an avoidant heart, you have to stop thinking in romantic cliches and start thinking in nervous system logic. Because for an avoidant, love doesn't unlock safety. Safety unlocks love, that's the order. And the shocking part isn't that they don't feel deeply. The shocking part is that their system often doesn't allow deep feelings to settle until three specific conditions are present. When these conditions are missing, even genuine attraction can turn into distance. When these conditions are present, even a guarded person can begin to soften in ways that feel almost surreal. The first safety trigger is consistent connection without emotional chaos. That doesn't mean you become robotic, silent, or emotionless. It means the relationship doesn't feel like a daily emergency. Avoidants often come from emotional environments where closeness was unpredictable, where love came with criticism, control, guilt, or overwhelm. So when a connection starts feeling intense and urgent too fast, the avoidant nervous system doesn't think, "This is beautiful." It thinks, "This might become heavy." It doesn't hear love, it hears risk. That's why calm rhythm matters. A steady pace, respectful communication, emotional maturity that doesn't turn every discomfort into a crisis. When your connection is consistent without being chaotic, you create a quiet message their body can relax into. Intimacy doesn't have to be a storm, intimacy can be stable, and that stability slowly disarms their flight response. The second safety trigger is autonomy with intimacy. This one is huge, and most people get it wrong because they confuse autonomy with emotional absence. Healthy autonomy is not disappearing, it's not withholding, it's not vagueness. It's the truth that two people can love each other without losing themselves. Avoidants often fear engulfment more than loneliness. The fear isn't always, "I don't want you." The fear is, "I'll lose control of myself if I need you too much." So when they sense that love will require them to surrender their identity, their time, their emotional bandwidth, or their independence, they back away. But when they experience a partner who respects individuality while still building closeness, something changes. Your presence starts feeling like freedom instead of pressure. You don't demand fusion. You offer partnership, you don't punish space. You communicate boundaries with clarity. That combination tells an avoidant nervous system, "I can be close to you without being trapped." And that is a rare form of safety. The third safety trigger is emotional adulthood in everyday moments. This is the secret ingredient that separates temporary chemistry from real capacity. Emotional adulthood looks like self-regulation. It looks like being honest without being explosive. It looks like accountability without humiliation. It looks like the ability to say what you need without turning the relationship into a battlefield. Avoidants are often highly sensitive to emotional volatility, even if they can't admit it. Volatility confirms their deepest assumption: closeness equals chaos. But when you show quiet emotional mastery, when you don't spiral, when you don't chase, when you don't collapse into self-abandonment to keep them comfortable, their system begins to update its beliefs. They start seeing that intimacy with you is not a trap. It's a stable environment where both people remain responsible for their own emotional well-being. This is also why these three triggers must work together. Consistency without chaos helps them trust the rhythm. Autonomy with intimacy helps them trust the structure. Emotional adulthood helps them trust the long-term reality. Take one away and the whole experience can feel unsafe to their nervous system. That's why you can be the most loving person and still not be able to unlock them if the relationship keeps feeling urgent, fused, or emotionally unpredictable. The avoidant system doesn't surrender to love because it's romantic. It surrenders to love because it feels survivable. And here's where your power becomes simple. You don't create these conditions by performing perfect partner energy. You create them by honoring your own standards. You move slowly enough to stay grounded. You communicate clearly without chasing. You allow space without allowing disrespect. You remain warm without becoming endlessly available. You show that you can love deeply and still keep your dignity intact. That's what makes an avoidant feel safe enough to approach rather than retreat. Because the moment an avoidant sees that this bond doesn't require emotional gymnastics, doesn't require them to rescue your anxiety or fight your storms, doesn't require them to lose themselves to keep you, they may finally do something that surprises both of you. They stop bracing. They stop deactivating. They start leaning in not because you compelled them, but because their body no longer sees intimacy as danger. And that is the real path to love with an avoidant, not intensity that overwhelms them, but safety that teaches them closeness can be calm. The self-respect switch is the moment an avoidant's nervous system starts to relax, not because you became colder, but because you became clearer. It's the moment they sense that your love is not a desperate performance. It's a stable offering with standards. And for many people, this feels counterintuitive. You might believe that the more you reassure, the more you explain, the more you prove your devotion, the safer they will feel. But avoidance doesn't always respond to increased devotion with increased safety. Sometimes it responds with increased pressure. Because when you over-give or over-pursue, an avoidant can unconsciously interpret that as an invisible contract they'll eventually be expected to fulfill. They start feeling responsible for your emotional stability. They start fearing that closeness will lock them into a role they might fail, so they retreat. Self-respect changes the dynamic because it removes emotional urgency from the bond. When you stop begging for clarity, you stop feeding the belief that they have power over your peace. When you stop chasing after silence, you stop teaching the relationship that distance is a tool that controls connection. When you stop collapsing into anxious over-explaining, you stop turning intimacy into an emergency. That shift signals emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is deeply calming to an avoidant system that has been trained to associate love with overwhelm. This is why people often notice an avoidant becoming more curious or more attentive right when the chasing ends. It's not because you manipulated them. It's because you removed the intensity that was triggering their defenses. You became a safe emotional environment rather than an emotional storm they have to manage. Healthy self-respect is quiet confidence. It says, I want love, but I will not self-abandon to keep you comfortable. And that statement, even if you never say it out loud, carries a kind of emotional gravity that can shift everything. Self-respect also creates a healthier power balance. In the old dynamic, your nervous system might have been leaning on their responses to feel okay. Their reply time determined your mood. Their warmth determined your confidence. Their confusion determined your anxiety. That gives an avoidant a level of emotional leverage they may never ask for consciously, but the system can still form. And the more power they sense they have over your emotional state, the more they may fear becoming responsible for it. That fear becomes another reason to keep distance. Self-respect interrupts that entire loop. It tells them, you are not the keeper of my stability, which removes pressure and increases the possibility of authentic closeness. Another piece of this self-respect switch is that it makes your love feel like a choice rather than a need. Avoidants often feel safer when they sense you can survive without them. Not because they want you to leave, but because it reduces the threat of emotional entanglement turning into dependency. When your love looks like desperation, their system hears obligation. When your love looks like grounded choice, their system hears safety. This is why self-respect is not the absence of love, it is love with healthy structure. You can see this in the day-to-day micro-behaviors that change when your self-respect wakes up. You no longer over-text to close emotional gaps. You don't interpret every silence as a crisis you must solve. You don't rush to soothe them when they're the one who created the uncertainty. You respond, but you don't chase. You speak your needs calmly, and you let actions do the proving. You stop trying to be the easiest person to love and start being the person who requires love to be real. This is where many people confuse self-respect with playing games. But this is not about pretending you don't care. It's about refusing to pay for connection with your dignity. It's about choosing pacing that keeps you emotionally safe. It's about recognizing that love does not deepen by you lowering your standards to fit someone else's comfort zone. Love deepens when both people rise into healthier behavior. And here is the part that truly matters. The self-respect switch doesn't guarantee they will become a secure partner. Some avoidants will respond to your self-respect with growth. They will feel the relief of being with someone who is emotionally stable and boundaried. They will begin to show up more consistently because the relationship feels less threatening. But others will respond with resistance. They may label your standards as pressure. They may accuse you of changing. They may try to pull you back into old patterns where your softness comes without structure. That response tells you what you need to know, because the self-respect switch is not only something that helps them feel safer. It's something that helps you see reality faster. If your self-respect shrinks their interest, then their interest was built on access without accountability. If your self-respect inspires consistency, then the connection may have real potential. Either way, you win clarity, and clarity is kindness when your heart has been living in uncertainty. This is why the self-respect switch is a turning point in avoidant love. It transforms you from someone trying to prove you're worthy of stable love into someone who already behaves like you are. It shifts the relationship from a chase into a choice. And it's often the first time an avoidant truly sees the full value of what being with you could mean. Not because you demanded it, but because you stopped abandoning yourself to earn it. There are two very different kinds of avoidance you can meet in your life, And if you don't learn to tell them apart early, you can confuse potential with pain for far too long. One is an avoidant who is genuinely wired for distance because of fear, past experiences, or nervous system conditioning, but who is still capable of growth, accountability, and secure love. The other is an avoidant who uses distance as control, not protection. The difference between them is not how charming they are, not how intense they can be at the start, not even how much they say they care. The difference reveals itself the moment you introduce healthy standards. A growth-ready avoidant doesn't hate boundaries. They need them. Your calm standards actually lower their nervous system threat level because it removes emotional chaos and replaces it with structure. When you say, "I like you, but I need consistency," they don't hear it as a trap. They hear it as a roadmap. They may not become perfect overnight, but they lean toward clarity instead of running from it. They don't punish your needs. They don't mock your expectations. They don't frame your self-respect as pressure. They might say, "I understand," or "I want to try." And then you see real effort building slowly, not just a burst of emotion designed to pull you back into the old cycle. This kind of avoidant often feels relieved by your emotional adulthood, because what scares them is not intimacy itself, it's the fear that intimacy will become overwhelming, unstable, or impossible to sustain. So when they experience your steadiness, your ability to communicate without threatening, your ability to love without self-abandoning, something shifts inside them. They begin to trust that closeness can be calm. They begin to trust that your love doesn't come with an invisible contract that demands perfection. They start to feel safer precisely because your standards show them that the relationship won't run on emotional emergencies. It will run on mutual responsibility. A control-based avoidant is different. They may still use the same language of fear, the same explanations about being not ready, the same soft phrases about taking it slow, but the emotional pattern tells a different story. This type prefers the gray zone because the gray zone keeps power in their hands. The gray zone allows them to receive attention without offering commitment. It allows them to disappear without paying the price of losing access. It allows them to enjoy your loyalty while keeping their options open. They may not consciously label it as control, but the system functions like control. So when you bring in healthy structure, they don't feel relieved. They feel threatened. This is where your clarity becomes the test. If you say, "I don't do hot and cold," a control-based avoidant may accuse you of being demanding. If you say, "I need consistency," they may call you needy. If you say, "I want a clear direction," they may act like you're ruining the vibe. If you say, "I'm not available for undefined exclusivity," they may respond with guilt, defensiveness, or sudden distance. And here's the key psychological tell. A growth-ready avoidant might feel uncomfortable, but they stay in the conversation. A control-based avoidant tries to shut the conversation down, because your boundary interrupts the benefits they were receiving without accountability. You'll often notice the pattern in how they respond when you stop chasing. A growth-ready avoidant may grow quieter, then more thoughtful, then more consistent when you hold your standard calmly. A control-based avoidant may spike with sudden affection only to regain access, then drift again once they feel safe that you're still emotionally available. That's the loop that keeps you trapped in confusion. You start thinking their return is proof of love, when it's often proof of access management. This is why you cannot measure an avoidant's readiness by their most emotional moments. Anyone can be warm when they fear losing you. The real measure is who they become when stability is required, who they become when your needs are cleared, who they become when the relationship is no longer fueled by urgency, but by everyday consistency. A growth-ready avoidant can handle that shift over time. A control-based avoidant often cannot, because consistency removes their ability to keep the bond on their terms alone. This keynote is not about demonizing anyone. It's about saving you from the world's most exhausting addiction, the addiction to potential. The addiction to the version of someone you see in flashes. The addiction to believing that if you love with enough patience, you will eventually earn the relationship you already deserve by default. But love is not a reward for tolerating emotional instability. Love is a partnership that grows where safety, effort, and respect exist on both sides. So the most empowering thing you can do is stop asking, "Do they care?" and start asking, "How do they respond to healthy standards?" Because caring is not the same as capacity. Missing you is not the same as choosing you. Chemistry is not the same as emotional maturity. Your boundary is not the problem. Your boundary is the truth test. If they respect your clarity, you may be dealing with someone who can grow. If they punish your clarity, you may be dealing with someone who wants the benefits of you without the responsibility of becoming safe for you. You are not here to crack an avoidant like a puzzle. You are here to build love that doesn't cost your peace. And if you remember nothing else from this entire conversation, let it be that. Because the biggest trap in avoidant love is the belief that if you just learn the perfect psychology, the perfect strategy, the perfect timing, you will finally unlock the version of them you keep sensing is buried under fear. That belief is not stupid. It's compassionate. It's hopeful. It's the heart trying to protect the meaning of what you felt. But hope becomes dangerous when it turns your self-respect into a bargaining chip. The truth is, you can understand avoidant psychology perfectly and still lose yourself if you forget your own worth. You can become an expert on attachment patterns and still end up waiting in emotional uncertainty if you keep treating your needs like something that must be negotiated down to remain lovable. That is why this final keynote is not about them. It's about you graduating from a version of love that required you to chase what should have been safe. When you love an avoidant, your mind can get caught in a loop of, what does this mean? You analyze their silences. You reread their messages. You search for hidden signs of care. You try to interpret distance as a sign of depth, fear as a sign of passion, inconsistency as a sign of complexity. And sometimes that interpretation feels comforting because it gives the chaos a story. But a story is not a relationship. A story doesn't hold you at night when you feel lonely. A story doesn't give you consistent communication. A story doesn't protect your nervous system from daily uncertainty. So the real spiritual and emotional shift is when you stop needing the story to survive. You begin choosing the standard. A standard is simple. A standard is stable. A standard protects future you. A standard sounds like, I need consistency. A standard sounds like, I don't do hot and cold. A standard sounds like, I don't do undefined exclusivity. A standard sounds like, I want love that feels safe in my body. This is where your life changes because self-respect is not loud. It's not a dramatic speech. It doesn't need a long explanation. It's calm and consistent action. It's you no longer performing emotional labor to keep an unstable dynamic alive. It's you recognizing that love cannot be a one-person job forever. Now here's the part that most people don't realize until they've been hurt too many times. This shift is not just about boundaries with an avoidant. It's about boundaries with your own old identity. The identity that used to confuse endurance with devotion. The identity that used to accept crumbs because the fear of losing the entire connection felt unbearable. The identity that used to speak less, need less, ask less, just to remain chosen. When you grow past that identity, you don't become less loving, you become less available for emotional confusion. And that is exactly why this final keynote is so powerful. Because at this stage, you don't need to win them back. You need to win yourself forward. If they are a growth-ready avoidant, your standards won't scare them away. They might feel challenged, but they will respect the clarity. They will lean into consistency over time. They will understand that safe love is built, not demanded. But if they are a control-based avoidant, your standards will feel like a threat because your standards remove the benefits of ambiguity. They will resist. They will delay. They will guilt you. They may suddenly become warm to re-secure access. Or they may vanish to protect their freedom. And either way, their reaction gives you the truth without you needing to chase it. This is the moment your nervous system learns a new language. You stop asking, how do I get them to love me? You start asking, does this love protect me? You stop asking, what if I lose them? You start asking, what if I lose myself again? You stop believing that love is proven by how much uncertainty you can tolerate. You start believing that love is proven by how consistently you can breathe inside it. That is the real graduation. Because a healthy relationship won't require you to become a therapist, a detective, and a motivational speaker just to receive stable affection. You shouldn't have to earn basic emotional security by shrinking. You shouldn't have to work harder for peace than you work for ambition, health, or purpose. Love is not supposed to be the place where your nervous system constantly rehearses survival. So your ending is not a cliffhanger that depends on them. Your ending is a decision that depends on you. You can still love the memory. You can still respect the good moments. You can still acknowledge that avoidance can come from deep wounds, but you no longer sacrifice your future to rescue someone from their patterns. That's what it means to love with dignity. And the most unforgettable truth is this: the real goal was never to master avoidant psychology so you could hold on to someone who stays half present. The real goal was to master your own self-worth so you could only stay where love shows up fully.